The autumn wind carried the scent of dying leaves and desperation as Margaret clutched her shawl tighter around her frail shoulders. She had walked 3 days to the Blackwood Forest, past the warnings carved into ancient trees, past the boundary stones that marked the territory of the wolf clans. Her arthritic knees screamed with each step, but she pressed forward. There was no other choice. There never had been. Behind her, Cassandra followed at a distance, her dark brunette hair whipping in the wind like a living thing. She had tried to stop her mother 100 times during their journey, but Margaret's determination was absolute. A mother's desperation transcends reason, transcends fear. The pack's territory was a dark wonderland of twisted oaks and towering pines that seemed to swallow the sun. The air tasted metallic, charged with an ancient power that made every hair on Cassandra's body stand on end. She was a modern woman, 30 miles from the city, yet she felt as though she'd stepped backwards through time itself into a world of myths and monsters. "Mother, please," Cassandra called out, her voice small against the vastness of the forest. "We should turn back. This is madness." Margaret didn't even slow her pace. "Your father made his bargain with them long ago, before you were born, before the sickness took him." Her voice was papery, fragile as winter leaves. "The Alpha King will remember. He must remember. He must help us." Cassandra wanted to scream. Her mother was living in a fantasy, clinging to stories and folklore as though they were contracts written in blood. 3 months ago, Cassandra had received a diagnosis that had turned her world to ash: acute leukemia. The best doctors in the city had given her 18 months, perhaps 2 years if she was lucky. Her mother, in her grief and desperation, had dredged up an old family legend that once, long ago, her late husband had made some kind of pact with the Werewolf King who ruled these woods. It was insane. It was impossible. And yet, here they were. The clearing appeared suddenly, as though the forest itself had parted to allow their passage. Before them rose a structure that should not have existed in the modern world, a castle of black stone and pale gray granite, its towers reaching toward a sky that seemed perpetually twilight. The architecture was a fusion of ancient fortress and something far older, something that belonged to a time before human civilization had decided on its conventions. Cassandra's breath caught in her throat. She had expected ramshackle cabins, or maybe some kind of compound. Not this. Never this. The gates opened before they could knock. 2 figures emerged from the shadows, wolves massive and silver gray, with eyes that held an intelligence no animal should possess. Cassandra's hand found her mother's arm, and Margaret stood tall despite her trembling. "I am Margaret Ashford," the old woman said, her voice stronger than it had any right to be. "Widow of James Ashford. I have come to invoke the ancient bargain made between my husband and your king. I seek an audience." The wolves regarded them for a long moment. Then, as though responding to some inaudible command, they shifted, bones cracking and reforming beneath skin that seemed to ripple like water. Where wolves had stood, men now emerged, their transformation so seamless that Cassandra's mind struggled to process what she'd witnessed. "You should not come here," the taller one said, his voice like gravel. "The Alpha forgives no one." "Nevertheless," Margaret said, "I will see him. It is my right, under the terms of the bargain." Something flickered in the werewolf's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or the ghost of recognition. He gestured toward the castle, and they were escorted forward through corridors lit by firelight that seemed to come from nowhere. The air grew colder as they descended, deeper into the earth beneath the structure, until Cassandra felt as though they were walking to the arteries of the world itself. The throne room was not what she expected. She had anticipated darkness and medieval grandeur, torture devices lining the walls, perhaps. Instead, she found herself in a vast chamber where thousands of candles burned in perfect silence, their flames creating dancing shadows that seemed almost conscious. The ceiling was lost in darkness above, and the floor was polished black stone that reflected the firelight like dark water. At the far end of the chamber, on a throne of twisted ebony and silver, sat the Alpha Werewolf King. Cassandra's breath stopped entirely. He was not what she had expected. Not in any way. Legend spoke of monsters, of creatures twisted by their dark nature. But the being who rose from his throne as they approached was beautiful, in a way that seemed to hurt to look at directly. He was tall, impossibly tall, with a broad chest and shoulders that strained the fabric of a shirt that appeared to be woven from silver thread. His skin was pale, almost luminescent in the candlelight, and his eyes were the color of burnished gold, ancient and knowing and utterly terrifying in their intensity. His hair was black as the spaces between stars, falling past his shoulders in a cascade that seemed to move of its own accord. When he moved, it was with a grace that belonged to Predator, all coiled strength and lethal elegance. "Margaret Ashford," he said, and his voice was a low rumble that seemed to resonate in Cassandra's chest, vibrating through her bones. "It has been many years." "Your Majesty," Margaret said, and she managed a curtsy despite her age and infirmity. "I come before you in desperation. My daughter is dying. The human doctors have given her no hope. You have the power to save her. I beg you to remember my husband's bargain and show mercy to his child." The Alpha King's gaze shifted, and for the first time, he seemed to notice Cassandra's presence. His eyes moved over her like a physical touch, assessing, measuring, cataloging. Cassandra felt something shift deep within her, something primal that responded to the weight of his attention in a way her civilized mind could not comprehend. "The bargain made with your husband was a private matter," he said slowly. "A life for a life, under terms that were agreed upon in blood and witnessed by the moon. It was paid in full 23 years ago." Margaret's face crumbled. "Then you will not help us?" The Alpha was silent for a long moment. His golden eyes had not left Cassandra's face. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, softer, but infinitely more dangerous. "I did not say that," he said. "There's a way, but it comes with a price. Old woman, are you prepared to negotiate?" Hope and fear warred in Margaret's expression. "What price?" "I have little of value." "The price is not yours to pay," the Alpha said. "It is hers." Cassandra felt her mother's hand tighten on her arm, and she found her voice, though it came out smaller than she wanted. "What are you asking for?" The Alpha King descended from his throne with a fluid grace that should have been impossible for something so large. As he drew closer, Cassandra could smell him, something like pine forests and summer storms in ancient stone. The scent made her head spin. "1 year," he said. "You will remain here in my castle under my protection. During that time, the poison in your blood will be drawn out. The sickness will leave you. You will be healed completely and irrevocably. But in exchange, you will give me 1 year of your life. 12 months, during which you will be bound to me as surely as if we were mated under the moon." "What does that mean?" Cassandra whispered. "It means you will stay in my domain. It means you will not leave without my permission. It means you will be mine in every way that matters to my kind, though not in ways that you need fear." His eyes held something that might have been humor, dark and dangerous. "I am not a monster, girl, despite what the legends tell. I will not force you to my bed, though the bargain would permit it. But you will be acknowledged as under my claim, and all the protections and privileges of that status will be yours." Margaret made a small, anguished sound. "She is my daughter. You cannot ask this." "I am not asking," the Alpha said, not unkindly. "I am offering. The alternative is that you return to the city, and she dies within 2 years. I give her life itself. Surely that is worth 1 year of service." Cassandra found herself speaking before her mind had truly decided. "I'll do it. If it saves my life, I'll do it." "No!" Margaret cried. "There must be another way." "There is no other way," the Alpha said. He extended his hand toward Cassandra, and she saw that his nails were sharp, almost claw-like, though they glinted like silver in the candlelight. "What is your name, girl?" "Cassandra," she said. "Cassandra Ashford." "I am Lucius Nightborn, king of the Blackwood territories, lord of the wolf clans." He smiled, and it was a terrible, beautiful thing. "Welcome home, Cassandra. Your old life is over now. Everything you knew dies here at the threshold. What comes next is something new entirely." When Cassandra reached out and placed her hand in his, a spark of electricity ran up her arm, and she knew with absolute certainty that she had just crossed a point of no return. The castle was enormous, a labyrinth of corridors and chambers that seemed to exist in perfect defiance of normal architecture. Cassandra's room was on the highest tower, with windows that looked out over the Blackwood Forest. It was beautiful and terrible, like a cage made of starlight. A servant, a young woman with lupin eyes and knowing smile, had brought her clothes, dresses of deep crimson and midnight blue, all silk and strange, elegant fabrics that she'd never seen before. "The king has ordered that you be given anything you require," the servant said. Her name was Iris. "Your mother has been settled in comfortable chambers in the guest wing. She will be well cared for." "How long can she stay?" Cassandra asked, though she already knew the answer. "Until dawn," Iris said gently. "The bargain permits no more than that. After first light, she must return to the human world, or bind herself here as well. The Alpha King is many things, but he does not break the laws of the old magic." Cassandra nodded numbly. She spent her last evening with her mother in a sitting room filled with firelight, trying not to cry as Margaret held her hand and repeated apologies that Cassandra didn't want to hear. "He will not harm you," Margaret said, though she sounded as though she was trying to convince herself. "Your father always said Lucius Nightborn was a man of honor in his way. Different, yes. Dangerous, certainly, but honorable. How did father know him?" Cassandra asked. It was a question she'd never been allowed to ask while her father was alive. Margaret was quiet for a long moment. "He saved your father's life once, during a hunting accident in these woods. Your father was bleeding to death, but Lucius found him and brought him to the castle, healed him with magic that I never fully understood. In gratitude, your father offered him a bargain, that if he ever had a daughter and that daughter came of age, she would spend 1 year in service to the king. It was meant as a gesture of respect and honor, a way to repay a debt that could never truly be settled." "He never told me," Cassandra said. "All my life, you never told me. Because we hoped it would never be necessary. Because your father died before you were even born, and it seemed foolish to bind you to something that might never come to pass." Margaret's eyes were wet with tears. "And because I have been selfish, my darling. I have kept you from the truth because I wanted you to have a normal life." Before Cassandra could respond, a bell tolled somewhere deep in the castle, and Iris appeared in the doorway, her expression apologetic. "Your mother must go now," she said softly. "I'm sorry. The magic does not permit exceptions." The dawn light was gray and cold as Margaret made her final embrace. "Be brave," her mother whispered, "and be careful. Lucius Nightborn is a man of principle, but he is still a man, still a wolf. Do not mistake his kindness for weakness. Do not let yourself fall into the trap of thinking you truly understand him. He is ancient and strange and built of things that have nothing to do with humanity." Then she was gone, escorted by 2 silent werewolves through corridors that seemed to swallow the sound of their footsteps. Cassandra stood at her window and watched her mother disappear into the forest, heading back toward the human world, an inevitable grief that awaited her there. She rested her forehead against the cold glass and waited for the weight of her decision to crash down upon her. It came like an avalanche. She had made a bargain with a werewolf king. She had bound herself to a creature of legend for 1 year. And somewhere deep inside, in a place she didn't want to examine too closely, she felt something that she could only describe as anticipation. That night, as she lay in an enormous bed in her tower room, listening to the wind howl through the forest, Cassandra felt something that she hadn't felt since her diagnosis. Hope. And beneath the hope, coiling like smoke, was something darker and more complex. Something that felt dangerously like desire. The first week passed in a blur of strangeness. Cassandra discovered that the sickness in her blood was not a visible thing, but she could feel it being drawn out of her like poison from a wound. At night, her body would ache as though she had been wrung out and hung to dry, but each morning she woke feeling slightly stronger, slightly more solid in her own skin. The doctors had said the leukemia would only worsen, that her body would slowly devour itself from within. But here, in this impossible castle in the heart of the Blackwood Forest, she was being healed by magic that defied all logic and reason. She saw Lucius only in passing during those first days. He would appear at breakfast or in the corridors, always impeccably dressed in clothes that seemed to be woven from shadow and starlight, always regarding her with those ancient golden eyes that made her pulse quicken in ways she didn't want to name. He would greet her politely, ask about her comfort, ensure that she had everything she required, and then he would disappear again, leaving her in the care of Iris and the other servants. The castle, she discovered, was not empty. There were dozens of servants, all of them bearing the subtle marks of the werewolf, eyes that caught the light just slightly wrong, a grace to their movements that no human quite possessed, a scent that was never quite human. There were also visitors, other supernatural beings who came and went through the castle's halls. A vampire woman with skin like porcelain and eyes like rubies. A fey creature whose presence made the air shimmer with possibility. An ancient thing that might have been a warlock or a demon, or something that had no name in any human language. They all acknowledged Cassandra with subtle respect that she didn't quite understand, until Iris finally explained. "You are claimed by the Alpha King," Iris said as she brushed Cassandra's hair one evening. "That means you are under his protection, under his authority. In this world, that places you above almost everyone else. There are old magics woven into the bargain you made. Everyone here recognizes those magics. You are neither human nor werewolf, but you are bound to our king by a bargain written in blood and witnessed by the moon. That makes you special." "Special how?" Cassandra asked, watching her reflection in the mirror. She was healing visibly now. The translucent quality that had plagued her for months was fading. Her hair had regained its luster, her skin its color. She looked almost like herself again, or perhaps like a version of herself that was stronger, sharper, more vivid than the one who had come here. "It means your loyalty matters more than most," Iris said carefully, "and it means that betraying the trust placed in you would have consequences beyond your understanding. The Alpha King is many things, but he does not tolerate disloyalty from those under his claim." 3 weeks into her captivity, she had stopped thinking of it as imprisonment, though the castle's boundaries were as absolute as any prison wall. Cassandra encountered Lucius in the library. It was an enormous chamber filled with thousands upon thousands of books, the shelves rising into darkness that torches and candlelight could not quite penetrate. She had been there for hours, seeking distraction in stories, when his presence suddenly filled the space beside her with a weight that was almost physical. "You read," he observed, moving closer to examine the volume in her hands. It was a collection of poetry, dark and sensual and strange. Most of those brought here by the bargain do not. What else is there to do? Cassandra asked, though her voice came out breathier than she intended. He was so close now that she could smell him, that intoxicating scent of pine and storm and something ancient and wild. "Many things," Lucia said. "The castle has vast gardens, though they are not as beautiful as they are in summer. There are libraries beyond this one. There is music. Hunting, if you felt inclined to try it. The servants have instructions to fulfill any reasonable request." "But I can't leave," Cassandra said, not looking at him. "That's part of the bargain. I'm confined to the castle and the grounds immediately surrounding it." "Yes," Lucia said quietly. "That was the price you agreed to. Freedom from the poison in your blood, in exchange for a year of limitation. It is a fair bargain by the standards of the old magic." "Fair," Cassandra repeated, and there was something bitter in her laugh. "You get a human woman bound to you for a year, and I get my life back. Yes, incredibly fair." She felt rather than saw him move, and suddenly he was directly in front of her, his hand reaching out to gently close the book she was holding. The touch of his fingers against hers sent a jolt of electricity up her arm that made her gasp. "You do not resent me," Lucia said, and it was not a question. "You resent your circumstances." "I resent being trapped," Cassandra said, finally looking at him. His golden eyes were so close to hers that she could see herself reflected in them, tiny and vulnerable and terrified and alive. "I resent that my mother had to walk into the forest as a supplicant. I resent that she had to beg for my life like a beggar asking for scraps. But you do not resent that your life has been spared," Lucia said, "and you do not resent this." He raised his hand, the one still touching hers, and held it between them. The electricity still flowed where they touched, a current of power that made her breath come short. "You feel it, the pull between us. It is part of the bargain. Not written in the words you spoke, but woven into the magic itself. A human bound to a werewolf king by blood and necessity. There's power in such things. What are you saying? Cassandra whispered. I am saying that you are free to feel as you wish. I am saying that I do not make demands beyond those required by the bargain itself. But I am also saying that I am not unmoved by your presence here. That your scent is becoming familiar to me in ways that my wolf finds significant. That watching you heal, watching you become strong again, has awakened things in me that I thought long dormant. He withdrew his hand, and Cassandra felt the loss of his touch like a physical wound. Finish your book, he said, and then come to my chamber. There is something I wish to show you. He left before she could respond, disappearing into the shadows between the bookshelves like smoke. Cassandra stood there for a long moment, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She looked down at the poetry collection in her hands, trying to focus on the words, but all she could think about was the feeling of his touch and the weight of his gaze. That night, she made her way through the castle's halls to the Alpha King's chamber, following an instinct that seemed to bypass her rational mind entirely. The door was already open when she arrived, as though he'd been expecting her, as though he could smell her coming from a distance. His chamber was nothing like she expected. The walls were lined with windows, and through them she could see the blackwood forest lit by moonlight, trees and shadows dancing in silver and black. The floor was bare stone warmed by a massive fireplace, where flames burned in impossible colors, green and violet and blue, like living magic taking physical form. Lucius stood before the largest window, his silhouette dark against the moonlit forest. I wanted to show you the other side of my nature, he said without turning around. Not the king in his throne room, not the businessman who negotiates with demons and fey lords. This is what I am when I am alone. This is the wolf beneath the man. As she watched, the boundaries of his human form began to shimmer and blur. The transformation was not violent or grotesque. It was almost elegant. Bones reshaped themselves, skin rippled and changed, clothes dissolved into nothing as his body lengthened and broadened. Where a man had stood, a wolf now rose, enormous and magnificent, with for the color of starlight and eyes that remained burnished gold. Cassandra should have been terrified. Instead, she found herself walking forward until she could touch the soft fur of his neck. The wolf did not move, simply turned his great head to look at her, and she felt the intelligence in those eyes, the consciousness of Lucius Nightborn looking out from the body of a predator. "You're beautiful," she whispered. "Both ways. Always." The wolf made a sound that was almost like a purr and stepped closer to her, resting his enormous head against her chest. She felt his breath on her skin, the weight of him against her, and something inside her that had been clenched tight for months finally began to ease. "I understand now," she said softly, running her fingers through his fur. "Why you could make the bargain. Why you could afford to save my life. You've lived for so long that healing is nothing to you. Life and death, sickness and health, they're all just small things, part of the endless cycle. You've probably saved dozens of humans. Hundreds, maybe." The wolf shifted, and then began the reverse transformation. Flesh flowing back into its proper form, bones cracking and resetting, until Lucius stood before her again, naked and perfect and utterly unashamed of his state. "I have saved many," he said softly, "but I have desired none of them the way I find myself desiring you. And that terrifies me, Cassandra Ashford. That is why I show you this. That is why I confess these things. Because in the old magic, there is no deception. There is only truth and consequence." He reached for her again, and this time his hands were gentle as they cupped her face, tilting her chin up so that she was forced to meet his gaze. "You have 5 months remaining in our bargain," he said. 5 months before you are free to leave this castle and return to your human world. I will not attempt to change that. I will not attempt to seduce you into extending the bargain or making a new one. But I need you to understand what is happening here to both of us. I need you to know that this," he gestured to the space between them, to the electricity that arced and crackled in the space where their energy merged, "is not part of any bargain. This is real. This is dangerous. This is something neither of us chose, but both of us can feel." "What do you want me to do?" Cassandra asked. "I want you to be honest," Lucius said. Not with me, with yourself. Because in 5 months' time, you will have a choice to make. You can return to your human world with your life restored, and forget that any of this ever happened. Or, he paused, and something almost vulnerable flickered across his perfect features. Or you can choose to stay. Not bound by bargain, but bound by desire. Bound by something real and true and terrifying. Lucius, Cassandra began, but he placed a finger gently against her lips. Not now, he said. You don't have to answer now. Just think about it. Just let yourself feel it. That is all I ask. The months that followed were unlike anything Cassandra could have imagined. She fell into a strange rhythm with the castle and its dark king, a dance that was part courtship, part exploration of a world she had never known existed. Lucius maintained his distance, respecting the boundaries he had set, keeping his own chambers except for meals where they sat across from each other at a table that seemed to stretch endlessly, speaking of philosophy and history, and the changing world beyond the Blackwood Forest. But the pull between them grew stronger with each passing day. It manifested in small things at first. The way her eyes would search for him when she entered a room, and how they would find him already watching her. The way conversations would drift into comfortable silences that somehow felt more intimate than words. The way he would arrange the castle schedule around her preferences. If she mentioned wanting to visit the gardens, they would be tended and open. If she expressed interest in a particular book, he would have it waiting in her chamber. By month 4, the boundaries had begun to blur entirely. It started with a dance. There was a celebration in the castle for the autumn equinox, a gathering of supernatural beings from across the territories, vampires and fae and creatures that Cassandra had no names for. She wore a dress of deep crimson that Iris had selected, a gown that seemed to shimmer between fabric and liquid between one moment and the next. When Lucius saw her, something flickered across his face. Hunger, desire, and underneath it all, a profound tenderness that made her chest ache. Dance with me, he said, and it was not a request. The ballroom was vast, lit by thousands of candles that burned in colors that had no names in the human spectrum. Music played from instruments Cassandra could not identify, haunting and beautiful and utterly intoxicating. When Lucius took her into his arms, it felt like the most natural thing in the world, as though they had been dancing together for centuries and would continue to do so for centuries more. I am losing myself, he said quietly, his mouth near her ear as they moved through the intricate steps. Every day, I lose more of myself to this. To you. The wolf in me recognizes you as mine. The man in me knows that I should release you from this bargain and let you go, let you have the freedom you deserve. But I cannot seem to do either thing. Then don't, Cassandra said. Do neither. Just be with me. That's all I'm asking for. He pulled back just enough to look at her, his golden eyes searching hers. You understand what you're saying? You understand that if you stay, you will become part of this world in ways that can never be undone? That the human world will begin to seem like a dream, pale and distant? I was dying, Cassandra said. That was my only certain future. Here, I'm alive. Here, I feel things I didn't even know were possible to feel. Why would I trade that for a slow fade back into normalcy? They danced through the night, and when the music finally faded and the other supernatural beings began to drift away, Lucius led her to a chamber she had never seen before. It was high in one of the towers, with walls of stone and windows that looked out over the entire Blackwood Forest. The moonlight poured in like liquid silver, and the room was simply appointed with only a massive bed draped in dark velvet and a fireplace where flames danced in shades of emerald and sapphire. This is the mating chamber, Lucius said, and there was a rawness in his voice that made her breath catch. In the old traditions, when a wolf king claims a mate, they come here beneath the full moon and make it binding, not through words or magic written in blood, but through something far more primal, something that rewrites the deepest parts of both beings. Are you asking me? Cassandra began, but he cut her off by drawing her close. I am telling you what this means, he said. I am giving you one last chance to understand the magnitude of what you would be choosing. Because if you come to this bed with me tonight, if you choose to bind yourself to me in this way, there will be no returning to the human world. There will be no pretending that this was a dream or a strange chapter in your life. You will be changed at your very core. You will carry my mark on your soul, and I will carry yours on mine. We will be tied together in ways that transcend death itself." Cassandra looked around the chamber, at the moonlight and the impossible flames, and the man before her, who was beautiful and terrible and utterly alien, and somehow, impossibly, exactly what she had been searching for her entire life without even knowing it. "I choose you," she said simply. "I choose this. I choose us." When he kissed her, it was like the moment when the sun rises after an endless night. It was like electricity and fire, and the feeling of coming home after being lost in the darkness for so long. His hands were gentle but urgent as they traced the line of her spine, as they drew her dress away like falling petals. And when they came together on that bed beneath the full moon, it was not violent or aggressive. It was a conversation without words, a binding of souls, a promise written in flesh and breath and the ancient magic that flowed between them like blood. She felt him everywhere and nowhere, as though the boundaries between her body and his had become permeable, as though they were merging into something new, something that was neither human nor wolf, but some impossible fusion of both. Time seemed to lose all meaning. The night stretched and compressed, expanded and contracted, until she could not remember a time when she had been separate from him, and she could not imagine a future where they would ever be apart. When dawn came, Cassandra woke to find herself marked. It was not visible. There were no scratches or bruises or physical evidence of what had passed between them, but she could feel it, a bond that thrummed through her veins like a second heartbeat, a connection that stretched like gossamer threads between her soul and Lucius's. She could sense his presence in the castle even before he stirred beside her. She could feel his emotions like they were her own, his contentment, his relief, his fierce protectiveness. "It is done," Lucius said, and there was wonder in his voice. He was still asleep, his golden eyes closed, but his hand found hers in the darkness and held it. "By the old magic, it is done. You are mine, and I am yours, until the ending of all things." "I have no regrets," Cassandra whispered, and she meant it with every fiber of her being. But as the days passed, she began to understand the true cost of her choice. She could no longer leave the castle. Before, there had been the theoretical possibility of escape, of choosing to leave when her year of service ended. But now, binding magic thread through every fiber of her being, anchored her to Lucius and to his territory with bonds that could not be broken without tearing her soul apart. The human world, which had seemed so real and immediate just weeks before, began to feel like a dream, a story she had read about someone else's life. More troubling was the change happening to her body. It began subtly, a heightened sense of smell, the ability to see in near total darkness, a strength in her limbs that shouldn't have been possible for someone who had been dying mere months ago. But it accelerated rapidly. Her senses became almost painfully acute. She could hear conversations happening on the other side of the castle. She could smell the blood running through Lucius's veins, the scent intoxicating and maddening in equal measure. "You're changing," Iris said gently one afternoon as she was braiding Cassandra's hair. The binding always does this. When a human chooses to stay with a wolf king, the magic transforms him gradually. By winter's end, you will be something between human and werewolf. Not quite one or the other, but something new. "Is it painful?" Cassandra asked. "No," Iris said. "Not for you. You were dying anyway, remember? The magic is healing you, remaking you into something that can survive in this world. It is a gift, though many humans struggle with the loss of their humanity." Cassandra thought her mother, who believed she was gone, lost to the forest and the monster king. She had sent a letter, written on paper provided by Lucius, but she knew her mother would not believe the words. Margaret would think it a forgery, a trick. She would believe her daughter was enslaved or dead or both. The thought made her chest ache, but there was nothing to be done. The barrier between the human world and this one was absolute now. She could not leave, and no letter could adequately explain what she had become. The transformation accelerated as winter approached. On the winter solstice, Lucius took her to a chamber deep beneath the castle. Deeper than the dungeons, deeper than a vault that held the oldest of his treasures. It was a cavern of black stone and crystal formations that glowed with an inner light. "The other wolf clans are gathering," he said. "They will want to see you. They will want to confirm that you are truly bound to me, that you are one of us now. This will be difficult. It will be strange. But it is necessary for your place to be recognized among them. The gathering was surreal. Dozens of werewolves in human form emerged from the darkness, circling Cassandra with an intensity that should have terrified her, but instead felt almost ceremonial. They were assessing her, she realized, testing the bond between her and Lucius, confirming that he had taken a mate and that she had accepted him fully. One by one, they approached her, and somehow she understood what was expected. She extended her hand, and they pressed their foreheads against her palm, and in that moment of contact, she felt a flash of their consciousness, their loyalty to Lucius, their acknowledgement of her as their queen. By the time the last of them had paid their respects, Cassandra felt exhausted but also exhilarated. She was no longer an outsider, no longer a human girl playing in a supernatural world. She was something new entirely, a bridge between the human world and the world of magic, a queen of the Blackwood territories, bound eternally to the Alpha Werewolf King. That night, as winter snow fell beyond the castle walls and the world became white and clean and new, Cassandra stood at her window and thought about the girl she had been just a few months ago. That girl had been dying. That girl had been desperate, frightened, clinging to the hope that some forgotten family legend might save her life. That girl had seen the Alpha King as a monster, a creature of nightmare and danger. But that girl was gone now. In her place stood someone new, someone with strength flowing through her veins, someone who could see in the dark and hear the heartbeat of the forest and feel the love of a being who had existed for centuries and would exist for centuries more. Someone who had tasted the dark romance of impossible love and found it sweeter than any promise of ordinary happiness. "You're thinking too loudly," Lucius said, appearing beside her as silently as smoke. He had a talent for that, moving through the castle without sound, as though gravity itself had no hold on him. "Your thoughts are practically vibrating through the bond." Cassandra leaned back against him, and he wrapped his arms around her, his chin resting on the top of her head. "I was thinking about my mother," she said, "about how she's grieving me, about how I can never go back to her." "No," Lucius said quietly. "You cannot. The cost would be too high. The transformation is too complete. You would sicken and die if you spent too long away from this place, away from the magic that now flows through your veins." "I know," Cassandra said, "but I hate that she has to suffer for my choice. I hate that I can't let her know I'm all right." Lucius was silent for a long moment. "There is a way," he said finally. "It would require you to reveal yourself to her, to show her what you have become. She would have to accept it, accept that her daughter is no longer quite human. But if she could manage that, we could arrange meetings. Rare ones, carefully managed. I could shield you partially during those meetings, so that you could tolerate the human world for a few hours at a time. Would you do that?" Cassandra asked, turning to face him. "Would you really allow that?" "For you," Lucius said, and there was something unguarded in his expression, something almost vulnerable, "I would move mountains. I would stop time itself. You are my mate, my love, my purpose. Your happiness is the only thing that matters to me now." He kissed her then, gently, reverently, as though she were something infinitely precious and fragile. But Cassandra could feel the strength behind it, the centuries of power, and will focus entirely on her, on this moment, on the bonds that tied them together with threads stronger than steel and more permanent than stone. Spring came to the Blackwood Forest with a fury of green and growth. Cassandra had been in the castle for nearly a year now, though time had become a strange and malleable thing. Sometimes days felt like hours, sometimes hours felt like weeks. Her transformation was complete. She could shift into a half-form, something between human and wolf, though she had not yet managed a full transformation. Lucius assured her it would come with time and practice. She had seen her mother twice. The first meeting had been difficult, heartbreaking, with Margaret weeping as she saw what her daughter had become. But the second meeting, 3 months later, had been easier. Her mother had begun to understand that Cassandra was not lost or enslaved, but transformed into something new, that she was happy, that she had chosen this freely and with full knowledge of the cost. "You love him," Margaret had said, seeing the way Cassandra looked at Lucius even across a distance. You truly love him." "Yes," Cassandra had said simply. "I do. I never expected to, but I do." Now, as spring painted the forest in shades of new life, Cassandra stood on the battlement of the castle and felt the future stretching out before her, a future without limits, without end, infinite and full of possibility. She was no longer dying. She was no longer trapped. She was no longer human, but she had become something far more wonderful. Behind her, Lucius emerged from the shadows, never quite arriving, always seeming to have been there all along. "The spring equinox approaches," he said. "We could hold another celebration. The clans are restless, eager to see you again, and there are ancient traditions that dictate we should renew our binding beneath the spring moon." Cassandra smiled. "Will you dance with me again?" "Always," Lucius said, and he took her hand and drew her close. "For as long as time permits. For as long as the stars burn in the sky. For as long as the earth turns and the seasons change. I will dance with you and love you and cherish you. This I swear by the old magic, by the ancient laws, by the very soul that binds me to you." "I love you," Cassandra said, and the words felt like power, like truth, like the most real thing she had ever spoken. "And I love you," Lucius replied, "my human girl who became a wolf, my queen, my mate, my eternity." As they stood together on the battlements, watching the sun set over Blackwood Forest and the shadows deepen into darkness, Cassandra realized that she had found something she never expected when her mother led her into these woods. She had found home. Not a place, but a person. Not safety, but understanding. Not an escape from her fate, but an embrace of a fate far stranger and more wonderful than she could have ever imagined. The dark romance of the alpha werewolf king had taken her life and remade it into something extraordinary. And as the first stars appeared in the sky above them, and the wolf in her answered the call of the wild night, Cassandra knew with absolute certainty that she would never regret the bargain her mother had made on her behalf. Because sometimes salvation comes not from what we choose, but from who chooses us. And sometimes the greatest love stories are the ones written in blood and magic and the strange darkness that exists between worlds. The forest sang her name, and she answered. She had been given a second chance at life, and she had chosen to spend it with a being of ancient power and terrible beauty. And in the end, that choice, not born of desperation but of love, had proven to be the greatest magic of all.